We're all familiar with the story of Noah and the flood. Unfortunately, this is a very controversial story. I'm not sure where controversy really has a place in interpreting the Bible, especially by people that love to read the Bible, because after you read the Bible purposefully, you sort of understand that thoughts and feelings and interpretations in your own mind can change, and they're very fluid, sometimes pretty temporary. Anyhow, Noah is entrusted with saving the world, more or less. The floods are coming. God motivates him and inspires him to collaborate with him to build the ark and supply it with his family and animals, all the things needed to survive the time of the flooding. We can go back into Noah's lineage, and there is Enoch. The book of Enoch is the book that survives the flood, presented to Noah. Enoch was a scribe, and he documented the conversations that God had with demons, other people, and angels. A lot of information in the book of Enoch. It does stand alone from the Bible. It was read alongside the Bible by people back in the day. Another famous person who ends up being Noah's grandfather is Methuselah, who is famous for living a very, very long time. Please consider that there's no real reason for our bodies to fail other than traumatic injury. The numbers of our days are in God's hands. Some people live a very, very short amount of time, and some people live longer, but very few people live over 100. If you look in the Bible, you will see that that is dictated, and it's been that way for a very long time. When we were created, and there's evidence outside of the Bible, if you choose to seek it, that people used to live a very long time compared to the way we live now, even with modern medicine and different health regimes. So I'll leave you to look that up on your own. Really, the point of this particular discussion is the flood. I would also suggest that you would read the Epic of Gilgamesh. Maybe a Cliff's Notes version of it, or a synopsis in Wikipedia. It's a very ponderous book. I was talking about floods in previous installments of Your Bible Sense. There is evidence of flooding. The book of Enoch talks about the preparations for that and the reasons for that. Noah's a very human person, very strong and immortal. He does what God tells him to do under very, very intense circumstances. How many people could do what he did? How did he build the ark? There's so much material on the ark itself. The technology, manpower, and materials required to build an ark that's described in the Bible boggles the mind. How it was done without power tools, for instance, how it stayed watertight, how it was structurally sound. How did they figure out that this thing was going to actually work? How did they move the materials? What kind of ropes and saws did they have? What about fasteners? There's a lot going on that Noah does not talk about. It's a very mysterious book. We do see evidence of flooding, and so we know more or less even scientifically that a flood did happen. But the ark and two of every type of creature and these things that are so outlandish to consider make it very difficult for people to accept this book, and I can see why. However, if we consider that the world that Noah lived in was not maybe the entire planet, and we look at things like North America and parts of South America that were flooded due to glaciation and different things, that we can go back to where Noah lived in the Middle East and say, yes, that was a part of his reality too. We know that floods happen. That's a fact. But we sometimes make this broad generalization that flooding happened everywhere. Flooding may have happened over the entire planet, but it doesn't really make sense that the whole earth was flooded. The purpose of the flood was to eliminate these giants that came down and infested the earth, for lack of a better term. Their bodies were houses for their spirits, and those bodies were used to procreate with humans, and it was causing a real mess. They were behaving very poorly. Not too much different than we're acting now, I suppose, so it makes you wonder if there's going to be something besides a flood coming. Anyway, anyway. That's the apocalyptic sort of message that I don't really get into, but these things bring about a lot of controversy. People argue and search for the old ark. They're looking for some evidence that this stuff really happened. You can think about why it happened more and get more out of thinking about why it happened. Why did God do these things? Who was Noah and what happened when they got off the boat? Just look and see what was going on. It's kind of like the Adam and Eve story. It's a rebirth of that story in a sense, but with a few more people involved. In that area, everyone was thought to have drowned. The Bible doesn't verify that other than saying that it did in fact happen, that everyone died but Noah and his family, people that were on the ark. If God repopulated the earth after the flood the way he populated the earth at the time of creation, then of course we see the diversity of ethnicities and the population of areas all over the world that can't necessarily be explained by just people stepping off the ark and procreating. This is also true with the story of creation. It does not say in the story of creation that God quit creating with Adam and Eve, and that, obviously Cain and Abel went to other cities and married women. So there was a significant amount of people and cities and all this that were created after Adam and Eve. The point of this particular installment is to think less controversially and more practically and more reasonably about what happened and why. The details of the story are very exciting. They are very invigorating to discuss with other people, but really the message of Noah is one that there is evil on the earth that is in people's hearts and minds that came from somewhere else. Those things were not on earth initially. When they did come down, they infected the earth and God did nothing to stop that. And now as we jump ahead into the New Testament, we see where Jesus acknowledges that Satan and evil are allowed to have authority on this earth. Our time here is short, and God is inviting us to come be with him. The tragedy and suffering that people that love God endure is mind-altering. And when evil prospers and good people do not, it's very confusing. So one wonders, why was the flood necessary if this was all going to just regroup and start all over? Why weren't the souls captured of these evil people? Why weren't they captured and destroyed or eliminated or sequestered from people so that people would grow and learn without all of this evil influence? My answer to that is that evil does exist in the entire universe, and we need to learn how to manage that, and when we encounter it, how to turn to God for power and strength. Like armor that Paul talks about, the full armor of God. If there is no enemy, you don't need any armor. So the strengthening that we get from experiencing evil and enduring it, and yeah, it hurts, it's suffering. It's terrible to witness, it's terrible to experience on our own, but it is part of our training and it's part of our preparation for what happens after earth. This to me is the greatest part of the story of Noah. It's a very interesting subject. I just would encourage you not to be controversial about it, to be more studious and introspective about it. Talk to people in a more inclusive way where you listen to their thoughts and then just start thinking about the higher things that come out of the story, and maybe not so much about the practical details and whether things actually happen the way they did, animals and the flood of the entire earth rather than regions, that kind of stuff. There's no way you're going to prove that one way or the other. I hope this is an inspirational message for you and that you enjoy it as far as a discussion and part of your education that you receive from God and the Bible here on earth.